What broad strategy do you think the UN and its partners should adopt to best help the people of Afghanistan now?
Well, the situation is unpredictable, and our duty is to engage. To engage based on what we can deliver, and what we can deliver is essentially humanitarian aid at the present moment, and to engage in order to explain to the Taliban how important it is for them to have an inclusive government of all the different ethnicities. Women must be able to work, girls must be able to have all levels of education, and at the same time to cooperate with the international community fighting terrorism in an effective way. And then we need to mobilize the international community to provide humanitarian aid.
Why do you hold this strong conviction that multilateralism is the only sure way forward for our world today?
Well, look what has happened to our world. A virus has defeated the world. More than 1 year and a half after everything started, we still have the virus spreading everywhere. And we see a dramatic impact on the lives of people, a dramatic increase in inequalities, economies in extremely difficult situations, and of course the most vulnerable suffering enormously. We need to solve the problem multilaterally, bringing everybody together, but we need to have multilateral institutions with a stronger capacity of governance in order to be able to prevent and in order to be able to solve the challenges that we face. And if we talk about climate, it is the same. We are on the verge of the abyss, and the truth is that the objective very clearly fixed by the scientific community, that temperature should not go above 1.5 degrees until the end of the century. We are risking not to be able to do it because countries are not cooperating among themselves. There is a lot of mistrust between developed countries, developing countries. There is a north-south divide that is making it difficult for all to assume commitments to reduce emissions in order to have a drastic reduction in the next decade or to reach carbon neutrality in 2050. So we need a strengthened multilateralism.
What actions do you wish to see implemented to ensure that gender equality is a reality by 2030?
Well, there are many dimensions, but there is a central question, which is a question of power. Power today in the world is still essentially concentrated on men and with a male-dominated culture. And power is usually not given. Power is taken. So we need women to fully fight for their rights, and we need the men that understand that only with full gender equality the world will improve and the problems will be solved. We need those men to engage effectively in the fight for gender equality. We need to have women and men in full equality where decisions are taken, where power exists, to make sure that we change this unbalanced power relationship.
Another marginalized group are the youth, and you've been calling for everyone to provide youth a seat at the table as nations strive to build an inclusive and equitable world for all. What would you like to see the youth themselves do to make sure that they get that opportunity?
I think young people now have enormous instruments to come together and to make their voice heard. Young people dominate social media much more than my generation. Young people have an enormous capacity of mobilization, as we have seen in the movements against racism, against climate change, against inequalities of different sorts, the movement for gender equality, where the young generation is, of course, extremely progressive in relation to the older ones. We need to create the institutional mechanisms to allow for the voice of the young people to be more present where decisions are taken. And that is the reason why, again, in the Common Agenda, we have a number of important measures to give young people voice and influence in the way the UN works.
You've warned recently that events in Afghanistan could also influence what happens next in certain volatile hotspots in Africa in particular, where extremist ideology is driving conflict. Could you please explain how you see this?
Well, I think if one looks at a situation like the Sahel, I'm very worried. And we see the terrorist groups emboldened by the situation in Afghanistan, the victory of the Taliban. I think it's time to really rally efforts to make sure that we create an effective security mechanism in the Sahel. That is why I've been always advocating for a strong African force by the African Union together with regional organizations, with support from the Security Council and the Chapter 7 resolution, and with contributions, mandatory contributions to guarantee that that force will be effectively supported. But then we also know that a military force is not enough. We need to have development, we need to fight the impact of climate change, and we need to do everything to improve the governance of the area. So we need really to boost our efforts, and I appeal to the international community to fully support it in the different dimensions, in the security dimension, in the development dimension, in the humanitarian dimension, in the governance and human rights dimension. And if we do it, we will be able to defeat terrorism in the Sahel. Then the same can be said about other parts of Africa.
What more can the UN do to make the world a more secure place?
Well, the biggest problem today is the lack of trust, and especially the lack of trust among the big powers. You see that in the difficulties of the Security Council to take adequate decisions to address the different crises in the world. And with this division, with this divide among the big powers, with this lack of trust, what we see is an environment of impunity. People think they can do whatever they want. So we need to rebuild trust among those that have more influence in world affairs to be able to cooperate in order to make sure that we are able to unite the international community in addressing the crises that are multiplying now.
Now the general debate is next week, Mr. Secretary General. Do you have any message, or what is your key message to the world leaders as they're coming next week?
My main message is it's time to ring the alarm bell. We are on the verge of a precipice and we are moving in the wrong direction. Look at the vaccination. Look at the difficulties in bringing together all countries to make sure that we make COP26 a success. Look at the multiplication of conflicts we have witnessed in the last few months. We need to change course and we need to wake up. So my message to the leaders, wake up, change course, unite, and let's try to defeat the enormous challenges we are facing today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary General.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to do this interview.